Greetings YouTube, this is Remarkable Republican here once again to bring you the truth with truth-flavored bias. Today, we find ourselves in a world where we have more people than fresh drinking water. That's a major problem. And many people have already started to recognize that one way to get more drinking water is to take salt water from the ocean and remove the salt, desalination, and then drink the water that way. However, that is slow, cumbersome, and expensive. What if we could do this on a much more large scale rather than just desalinating locally? Here's what I'm proposing. Let's desalinate the whole ocean, and here are the reasons why we should do it and some ideas about how we might go about it that would be more efficient than the method that we're using right now, which has not really desalinated very much of the ocean so far. Let's explore the key issue of the water shortage. Already in places like Saudi Arabia and San Francisco, where there is a shortage of fresh water, we've seen that the locals have turned to desalination in order to try to remove the salt from the water close to them. This is something that has been copied in other regions, mostly in the Middle East, but increasingly also in the US. But all of this local stuff really isn't very efficient. The ocean is the largest body of water in the world. However, salt water isn't potable. This means that the ocean is not very efficient at producing resources that are valuable to humanity. Previous desalination projects have had the right idea. We need to get drinking water from the largest source of water. But they just have not been on a large enough scale. Trying to just localize water and only really desalinating the water right outside of your city that's on the coast is just not doing it on a large enough scale, and after a little bit of time the water that you desalinate locally will then get mixed back in with the salt and be completely ruined. Desalination of the whole ocean, on the other hand, would solve the problem, and it would also make sure that fresh water is universally available. Fresh water, if it was available everywhere in the world in all of the oceans, would be something that people could access no matter where they live, and it would mean that even the poorest people on Earth could go to a random beach and drink the water, and then be fine. There are a number of major benefits that we could get from desalinating the entire ocean, and I'm going to go through them. This is not necessarily in order of importance, but all of these things are in fact very important. One major benefit that we would see from desalinating the entire ocean and making it freshwater is that freshwater is a far superior source of life than saltwater. Saltwater is more toxic and acidic. And if we think about human life, we see that people with high blood pressure are a lot more likely to die. Salt causes high blood pressure. So you can only imagine what it must be like for creatures which live in an ocean full of salt. If these creatures could instead live in fresh water, they would really flourish. Right now, sea life is divided into two. There are animals that can live in any kind of water and then animals that can only live in fresh water. So this would really strengthen the ecosystem by enabling sea animals to move from many different areas that they currently can't move from. Can you imagine how many fish there would be if all of the water were fresh? Fish, of course, is very healthy if you eat it, and if we have an abundance of fish, that could help to solve world hunger and improve the health of people. So not only could we have all the drinking water we'd ever need, we could also have all the food we'd ever need. So hunger and thirst would become things of the past. And we could accomplish all of that just by desalinating the ocean. While there is a widespread belief among communists that there is global warming occurring, the truth is that we are actually overdue for an ice age, and that if an ice age were to hit us, say, right now, it would really screw things up. A whole lot of areas would become uninhabitable, including Alaska and Canada. So here's what a freshwater ocean could give us that a saltwater ocean cannot. Salt water freezes more easily because it's thicker and it's full of granules of salt. It's already just a little bit closer to being a solid than fresh water, so it would freeze easier. If we convert the oceans to fresh water, then we can help to prevent or at least very much slow down an ice age. And even if an ice age were to hit, it would at least end earlier because the water would be fresh. So that is another major benefit we could get from desalinating the ocean. Another major benefit that we could get from a freshwater ocean is that storms such as hurricanes would be a lot less devastating. Freshwater is lighter than saltwater. As I said, saltwater has granules of salt in it, and this means that freshwater, by virtue of being lighter, will do less damage when it hits stuff. So if we think about it, if there are storm surges in a hurricane, such as what we saw with Hurricane Katrina, there would be about 20% less damage because the water would be 20% lighter. So this would mean a lot less property damage and also a lot fewer deaths. People would be much more able to survive and also to recover afterwards. Another thing to consider is that your home or your car would be a lot more screwed over by being flooded out with salt water than it would by fresh water, because salt water tends to create a lot more rust and mold than fresh water. There are also a lot of other benefits that we would get from a completely freshwater ocean as well. Because the water would be lighter, the ocean would be a lot easier to sail through. So if you are an international company which ships things overseas, you would find that shipping costs would go down quite a bit. The ocean would be easier to get through, so you'd be able to go a little faster, and also maintenance costs on ships would be lower. There would be less rust on ships, and this would help both large corporations and small fishermen as well. Beaches would also be a whole lot safer. This is because the water would be a lot more transparent, so if you were running a beach, it would be much easier to keep track of sharks and kill them if they get too close to the coast. It would also be a huge boost to the tourism industry because now all beaches will become safer and more appealing. What people really look for in a good beach is the transparency of the water a lot of times. So now that all of the beaches will have transparent water, this will mean that all the beaches will be crowded all the time, hence a big boost to tourism. So this is a major win for everyone. And also, of course, the fishing would become phenomenal as well. So all of the people renting out poles at the piers on the beach would be killing it. There are also a few national security things to consider, and I think the US would be advantaged by a freshwater ocean vis-a-vis other countries. So, seawater is heavier and murkier than freshwater, and therefore it's easier to hide in if you're a submarine. This means that you don't necessarily have to have the absolute best submarine to be hidden in saltwater, whereas in freshwater you would need much more advanced stealth technology. So what saltwater oceans do effectively is help to level the playing field for the inferior submarines produced by Russia and China, our geopolitical foes. If the oceans were composed exclusively of fresh water, then only American submarines would be impossible to detect, and we'd be back to the level of superiority we had in the Cold War, where the Russians couldn't detect anything but we knew where all their shit was. So it actually would give the US a major leg up in our ongoing Cold Wars with Russia and China if we could have a freshwater ocean where the full extent of our technological superiority would be evident. I think it's obvious to anyone with an ounce of humanity or business sense that the right move is to desalinate the ocean and try to create as much fresh water as possible, since this would have enormous benefits for the human species and for the earth itself. But the real vexing question is, how do we actually do this? It is a daunting task, and perhaps there's a reason why the desalination plants at San Francisco and Saudi Arabia only work locally. here is what I think might be more effective if we can do it on a grand enough scale and if we work together as a global community to pull this off. If you think about potable iodine tablets to purify water that you might take with you when you're camping, the principle should work approximately the same way. If we create these on a big enough scale and then spread them across the ocean, so say if we have different treatment sites, that should over time fix the problem and clear out the ocean of all of the salt in the water. It would definitely be more efficient and cost effective than the current method of desalination, which only works locally and only creates little pockets of water which then get engulfed by salt later on if they're left unattended for more than like a few hours or whatever it might be. So this is clearly something to look into. I'm not an engineer, so I don't really know exactly how to go about doing this. It's also possible that we could do something in terms of adding chemicals to the water which would help to separate out the salt. So we could do it kind of like the way that pool cleaners work, except it would of course be a different chemical, but the same basic idea, the way that you clean out a pool. And maybe even add some pumping stations somewhere to make sure that things are cycled through pumps that are in the ocean itself, because obviously it is far more efficient to desalinate water where the water is than pumping the water to somewhere else and then desalinating it and having to pump it back out into the ocean and then creating a pocket of water to pump water back from. That's just inefficient. So it would obviously be better to desalinate the water in the water. But I don't know the exact method, but I think either the pool method or the method outlined on this slide would probably be the most effective. But again, I think I've made a compelling case that desalinating the ocean is the right move, and someone else can figure out the exact details of how we get that done. Until next time, I'm Remarkable Republican, bringing you the truth with a truth-flavored bias, signing out.